I want to welcome everybody to a joint meeting today of both the West and the East Turlock Subbasin GSA Technical Advisory Committees and also the Turlock Groundwater Basin Association. My name is Herb Smart. I'm a member of the Technical Advisory Committee, and I'm going to be hosting the meeting for a brief moment until I hand it off to the chairs to run the meeting. So just a couple ground rules before I do that. First off, let's see here. These are things we're familiar with, but please don't put the call on hold. Please mute until you wish to speak. If you can, please unmute when you do wish to speak. Just like an in-person TAC meeting, we have members here from the TAC and also members of the public interacting. Our agenda has a public participation item early on, should you want to participate. And we have a chat feature that'll be used if you like. We're recording the meeting right now for record keeping purposes, and it's posted within, I want to say within 24 hours usually on the Turlock Groundwater YouTube channel. And we already have, there's materials available that are going to be presented today that are available on turlockgroundwater.org currently. And the main presentation is from Todd Groundwater, and that's up there as well when you find the meeting date. So that is all I have. I see Michael Cook is on the call. I'll just hand over to you and let you run the meeting from here.
Thank you, Herb. Let me start my video. Okay, you guys see me? Hear me? Okay, good. Herb, keep up the agenda.
Working on it now.
So as Herb mentioned, this is kind of an unusual event. We have our normal joint meeting of the East Turlock and West Turlock Subbasin Technical Advisory Committees, as well as a meeting of the original Turlock Groundwater Basin Association, because there are some action items or meetings we have to do periodically through that group, as some of their duties have not yet been taken on by the Groundwater Sustainability Agency. So hopefully over time that will get resolved. So first thing I want to do is call the meeting to order. At least let's start with the West Turlock Subbasin GSA. So right now I have representatives from Turlock Irrigation District. I see Michael Clipper, Josh, and me. So we've got TIDs represented. We have Tara from the city of Turlock, Leandro from Delhi, Miguel from Modesto, Brody from Merced County. Let's see if I have a quorum here. Was Walt on? We have Stanislaus County. So right now I see 5 members or 5-member agencies of the West Turlock Subbasin. So at this time we don't have a quorum for the West Turlock. Oh, Michelle Harris? No. Is that Michelle or no? Okay. Anybody else in the West Turlock that I've missed? West Turlock Subbasin GSA TAC? Okay. So right now we have 5 members, so I'll keep an eye on that as we go through. Maybe, let me see here. So the next item is the court order for the East. Oh, sorry, East Turlock.
Michael, we have a quorum on the east side.
All right. So Michelle, yeah, associate members count for quorum. So keys, so it's 6. So we're close. And then with Dennis is here, I see, and Kevin is here. So that makes 8. So we do have a quorum of the Turlock Groundwater Basin Association. So thank you, people on the east side, for helping us get a quorum there. So I'm calling the meeting, calling to order the meeting for the TGBA, and Kevin's called to order the East Turlock. And have I missed anybody from West Turlock?
Michael, I somehow got kicked out of the meeting. This is Debbie, but I'm trying to get back in.
Okay.
So I'm on the phone right now.
I see your phone
Sorry.
number. Okay, no big deal. Okay. So we've called to order item number 4, approval of minutes. West Turlock, obviously we can't adopt our minutes. We don't have enough people. Kevin, do you want to go ahead and approve your minutes from August 27th? And September 10th, if you will.
Sure. Dennis, would you make a motion to accept the minutes from the
Yes,
August
so moved.
27th and September 10th meetings?
So moved.
And Walter Brody, would you mind seconding, please?
Yeah, sure. I can go ahead and second that.
Brody can? Okay. So by Dennis and Brody. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anybody against? Not hearing anybody against, it passes unanimously. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Kevin. Okay, well, sorry, Herb, gonna scroll down a little bit. Did you do all 3 sets of your minutes, Kevin? Sorry.
Did we have to do the TGBA one as well?
Yeah, I'm working on that right now. I'm gonna screw it up.
That's the third set. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So TGBA is here, so I'd like a motion to adopt the minutes for the TGBA for the meeting stipulated. Where are we? So it'll be the TGA minutes from April 23rd, 2020. I have a motion to adopt those minutes.
Make a motion, Miguel City Modesto.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Miguel.
Miguel.
A second from
Kevin can second.
anybody? I'll be
Oh,
shy now.
Kevin can second, I said.
Kevin, thank you for Kevin. Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, the meetings, the April 23rd, 2020 TGBA meeting stand approved. Item number 5 is public participation. This is the time set aside for members of the public to directly address the technical advisory committees of the or the TGBA on any item of interest that's within our subject matter jurisdiction. You can, if there's a specific item you want to address later in the agenda, that's probably the better time. But if you want to do that now, you're welcome to do so, or any other item not on the agenda. So at this point, do we have any public participation? Okay, hearing none and seeing no hands raised, let's go to item number 6, budget, and start with Michael Clipper, Treasurer of the West Turlock GSA. Over to you, Michael.
Hello, everyone. For the West Turlock GSA, our account balance at the end of August was $108,081.80. And then moving on to the basin-wide account, the August 31st ending account balance was $870,842.97. Any questions on any of that?
Are there any cash calls coming up, Michael, or anything like that? Or are we good right
Yes. Yes. I'm in the process of creating invoices. I kind of got a little behind on some stuff. But yes, that should be sent out here in the next week or so, week or two. Been on my to-do list for a couple of weeks now with the same time frame.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Michael Clipper for the West Turlock Subbasin GSA budget? Okay, hearing none, over to the East Turlock Subbasin. Kevin?
Thank you, Michael. This morning, the East Turlock Subbasin GSA JPA board met. Karen Whipp provided a summary of the financial report at that meeting. It was $200,000 and some change in their accounts. They paid their bills, which will reduce that amount. But all is going per budget. And there's a Prop 218 process and started to put a per acre charge out on the east side to generate the remaining funds needed to complete the GSP. Other than that, unless there's questions, that's all I had to report from the East Turlock Subbasin GSA.
Thank you, Kevin. Any questions for Kevin? Okay, hearing none and nothing in the chat box, we'll move on to item number 7. California statewide groundwater elevation monitoring, or CASGM as we know it, and discussion and coordination regarding CASGM monitoring. The next event is scheduled for the fall or November of 2020. Debbie, you want to take us away on that one?
Sure. Hi. So as you all may recall, we are required to comply with CASGM, which is the California statewide groundwater elevation monitoring program, and that is currently being done through the auspices of the Turlock Groundwater Basin Association. And both TID and the Eastside Water District have been monitoring wells twice a year and inputting that information into the CASGM database. And so the next monitoring event is November of this year. And so this is our opportunity to talk about, or at least coordinate on that elevation monitoring. And so TID will be doing its portion of the Subbasin, and I'm sure that Kevin and John are working on the eastern side of the Subbasin and the monitoring wells there. Yes, Kevin?
Yeah. Yes. John has suggested a date of October 20th. Is that too early? Should we push that back?
Well, the monitoring plan does call for November, the first 2 weeks in November. Ideally, it's about the same time each year, but it could be at the end of October too. The reasoning behind that, I think, was that there sometimes can be some additional pumping for the refineries and the canning folks and those kind of things towards the end of October. And so that was why we thought early November was the best point for us for the end of the kind of growing season monitoring event.
Okay, we'll take that, see if we can move it into the first 2 weeks. No problem.
That sounds great.
Thank you.
Thank you. And that's all I had. Unless others had questions or wanted to discuss further.
Any questions for Debbie? Okay, moving on to item, sorry, is there a question? Okay, moving on to item number 8, Groundwater Recharge Assessment Tool Ad Hoc Committee. Consider formation of an ad hoc committee to assist with the customization of the Groundwater Recharge Assessment Tool, otherwise known as GRAT, for the Turlock Subbasin, funded by our Prop 68 grant. And as you know, we had our kickoff meeting last Friday. Debbie, you want me to take that, or you want to take that?
I thought you were going to take that one.
I am taking it.
I'm on it. Thank you.
No problem. So we had a kickoff meeting last Friday, which I thought went very well. I'm very excited about the opportunities that GRAT is going to provide us in terms of helping us put our GSP together and also developing projects and programs for our GSP through the whole basin. And Sustainable Conservation provided us with a list of data requests, and people are starting to work on that. The thought is that we probably need a subgroup to work directly with Sustainable Conservation and their partner consultants, so we can keep the GRAT on track. As you know, it's a fairly aggressive schedule, but it's important we move quickly just so we get the data and information that we can, one, put in the GSP as we start developing plans and programs and help inform our decision making. Now, I asked last Friday for potential volunteers from the west side, at least, who are interested in participating on the ad hoc subcommittee, and I got Sirb and Debbie from TID. So we have 4 members from the West Turlock who are interested. Ideally, I get another county rep like Walt or someone else from Stanislaus County, because I think a lot of these projects or opportunities will be in unincorporated areas. So I think it'd be good to have a county rep. But obviously, West Turlock doesn't have a quorum. We can't take real action. But my kind of thought as the chair of the TAC will be to put those 4 or 5 people together on a subgroup, and then obviously on Kevin on the East Turlock, maybe your board. I think your board could appoint an ad hoc committee of TAC members or board members or whatever to work on this project. It is of short duration. It's for a limited purpose, and help us get the GRAT tool done quickly. Kevin, any thoughts from you before I turn it over to the larger group?
Nothing. My head is empty.
Okay. Any questions or additional comments from the group? Anybody else want to volunteer to be part of the subcommittee?
Sorry, I got a call in between there, Mike. Did anybody from the East Turlock Subbasin GSA volunteer?
No, but I figured I'd let you kind of work on that, Kevin, and also work
Yeah.
with your board on appointing the committee.
Yeah, I was going to say between Brody, myself, Dennis, yeah, we could, one of us will participate.
Perfect. Okay, so we'll go as that, and I'll follow up with Ward directly. Just I am concerned that we get some representation from Stanislaus County, just because of the unincorporated areas and the white areas that aren't inside TID or even in the east side. That may be good locations that I think will help to have a county rep on that group. So that is that for item number 8. Unless anybody else has any more questions. Okay, good, thank you. Okay, with that, we'll move on to number 9 and our continued discussion of sustainable management criteria, particularly land subsidence and water quality. We're handing over to Todd Groundwater for that. Over to you, Todd. Oh, hey,
Yes.
Phyllis.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Nice to hear you again. I'm getting up a screen for everyone, and you'll be able to see this very soon. Okay, can you see the screen? Great, thanks so much. Okay, so as we continue our conversation today on sustainable management criteria and begin for the first time to look at a few management actions, examples pretty much from adjacent subbasins. So let's just dive right in. We are now working on agenda item number 9, where we're going to talk a little bit about land subsidence and water quality sustainability indicators today, and then move into agenda item number 10, an initial discussion of some of the management actions that have been proposed in adjacent subbasins. With respect to the land subsidence sustainability indicator, some of this is review. You've seen this before. In brief, historical subsidence really hasn't been a big issue for the Turlock Subbasin. Most of the Central Valley Subbasin, at least the portions east of the San Joaquin River, the subsidence has been associated primarily with the compaction of the CORCORAN clay. This was especially well documented in the Merced Subbasin to our south. The subsidence, of course, could occur in the Turlock Subbasin if we decrease pore pressure in the clay over time. And I didn't pull out those slides. We've been through the mechanics and the issues and development of land subsidence before, so I'm not reviewing that again today. We all recognized that the potential for future subsidence, number one, could occur, and also it could be avoided if water levels were maintained at or above historical water levels. Well, the problem for us trying to target historical low water levels in this lower aquifer below the CORCORAN clay is there's just not a lot of information. So we certainly have enough information in the upper aquifer. We have a line here shown on this map as a review. This is the CORCORAN clay extent. So the CORCORAN clay gets beneath the subsurface. It becomes shallower as it gets closer to this line. And then on this side of the line, we no longer have the aquitard in the subsurface. And as a result of that, the area that we are most concerned with land subsidence potential is the portion of the subbasin that is west of this CORCORAN clay extent, west of this dotted red line. And so above the CORCORAN clay, we have we have more wells than are shown on this map, and enough information to help us understand what historical water levels have been over time. But the declining water levels below the Corcoran clay could also decrease pore pressure and trigger subsidence. And the data there are where it's really insufficient to be able to look at historical low water levels. There are only a few wells that are screened entirely in the lower aquifer. Those are shown by the blue dots here. Not only are they clustered mainly around the urban communities, but most of these are production wells. And in being production wells, they really are not reflective of actual water levels that are in the adjacent lower aquifer. And as a result of that, we don't have good coverage, and they're production wells. So it's very difficult for us to actually know what the lowest water levels have been with respect to this lower aquifer. And so from a technical perspective, I was trying to figure out exactly how we could come to some reconciliation with respect to monitoring. And it occurred to me that we do have a few monitoring wells, and we also have a surface. These are contours. These are groundwater, they are elevation contours on the top of the Corcoran clay. So this is just a subsurface picture of if I drilled down here, for example, then I would encounter the Corcoran clay according to this surface, not exactly correct, but as accurate as we can get it for now, somewhere around a -70 feet below sea level. So this gives you some kind of an idea about where in the subsurface the Corcoran clay resides. And as a result of that, it gives us some kind of a better understanding about how we can avoid moving water levels to a position where it might impact or dewater at least portions of the Corcoran clay. So we do have 2 existing lower aquifer monitoring wells. Their approximate locations are shown by these big fat orange dots. These are existing monitoring wells that have been installed by the city of Turlock and the city of Ceres. And so those 2 do provide some way of monitoring water levels in the lower aquifer. Now, we also have, as everyone is aware, the Round 3 Department of Water Resources grant under the Sustainable Groundwater Management Program. And we have envisioned that we could install 2 additional monitoring wells in the lower aquifer. The location is to be determined. That's being investigated now. This has to do with a lot of additional criteria than just me putting 2 big dots on a map. But this just gives you a visual of thinking in terms of how these monitoring programs could be set up. We probably would want to do additional wells over time to be determined how many and where. And if there are additional wells that we could also pull in for monitoring, we'll be investigating that as well. But just for the example that we see here, we could set minimum thresholds at or near the top of the Corcoran clay that we see in each one of these monitoring points. For example, we will know exactly where the Corcoran clay is. We know where it is already in the 2 existing wells, and as we drill, we'll be able to identify in the subsurface exactly where the Corcoran clay is in these 2 new wells as well. So that will give us a method and an approach for making up for the fact that we don't really have historical water level data to use to be sure that we are above what has been the lowest water levels to date in that area. We also have recognized that because we're doing subsidence monitoring for the first time, we would probably want to supplement that direct monitoring, especially if we only start out with just a few wells. We would want to supplement that direct monitoring with some additional screening data. Candidates for that might be the INSAR data that DWR is producing and publishing on their website. And we also have benchmark measurements in the subbasin that have been used in the past. So we could continue to monitor that as part of our screening data analysis. So I wanted to at least point out that we now, from a technical standpoint, have a way of getting at a way to set an MT and monitor in areas where we really have had very little data in the past. Does anybody have any questions on that? Okay, so.
Phyllis, I have one question.
Yes.
Those 4 monitoring locations, do you think they'll be good enough, or do we really, I mean, you mentioned adding more, which I understand, but in terms of setting our minimum thresholds and sustainable management criteria for the original, for the first draft of the GSP, you think those 4 locations are going to work?
I think that we will look and see if we can find some additional wells as well. But the one of the management actions that we're going to be talking about is improvements to the monitoring network. So we can certainly move in that direction. But for now, at least we have a way forward. I've been concerned about this because we've talked several times about using the lowest water levels to make sure that we mitigate, avoid, or prevent land subsidence from being triggered in this aquifer. And I've been trying to determine how we do that without the data. And I think that this provides us with a way forward. And since it has not been an issue to date, and since we will be able to begin this additional screening information right away, I think that we can continue to work on our monitoring program in this western lower aquifer over time. Does that make sense? Right. So then that would modify the framework a bit. Recall that we have a working memorandum that we've modified several times now with respect to the revised, the working definitions and framework for undesirable results and how they might be identified in the field. And so I've just incorporated now this concept into the working definition that we have for land subsidence. The general definition of undesirable results has not changed. Significant and unreasonable inelastic land subsidence that adversely affects land use or reduces the viability of the use of critical infrastructure. And we've talked about how we would identify examples and details of the critical infrastructure to make this definition more robust as we go forward. But then how do we actually see that? What's the metric? Well, the metric is that the undesirable results could be evidenced by an exceedance of minimum thresholds, which would be expressed as groundwater elevations at representative monitoring points based on the top of the CORCORAN clay with a buffer. And then at the land subsidence monitoring locations. And then I'm suggesting, and subject to comment and revision going forward, that you look at this in 2 consecutive spring monitoring events. One of the things that we've seen from the screening data is that it's very sensitive to field workings. And so as crops change over time, some of the screening data becomes a little less reliable. At least that's been my experience from looking at it in other subbasins in the Central Valley. So we want to look at what's going on with respect to a spring monitoring event and begin to recognize whether or not we really are having inelastic land subsidence versus elastic land subsidence. The water level monitoring, of course, would be supplemented by the ongoing screening data, and that's, again, to be determined, but the examples are the 2 that we have talked about over time. So that's what I have today for moving forward on the land subsidence MTs and monitoring. Anyone have any questions or any comments at all on the land subsidence sustainability indicator?
So this is Michael again. Sorry, just to clarify. So undesirable results are kind of like a red light. Minimum threshold is kind of like a yellow light, kind of indicating, hey, you got something going on here. You might want to slow down and kind of, by reaching the minimum threshold, it's not the end of the world, but it's just kind of a warning sign. We need to watch what we're doing, right? Am I on the right track? Absolutely. Okay. Thank you.
2 things, Phyllis. This is Kevin.
Hi, Kevin.
Hi. You went over that quickly about the spring monitoring. So basically in the spring monitoring, if you were to do fall monitoring, well, if you're doing spring monitoring, fall would be bad, I guess is what you're saying. And then the second question is there any data at all out there that show that any part of the basin is close to the CORCORAN clay?
So for the first question, the fall data is just after we have had, you know, a summer of irrigation pumping. And it's also the time period where we've had peak pumping for the cities and urban communities as well. And so if there is elastic subsidence or a little bit of change with respect to the ground surface associated with that full summer of pumping, it might be reflected in the fall data, but then the recovery could potentially, and we don't know exactly what the time period is for elastic subsidence recovery, but that recovery could be manifested by the time we get to spring. So the idea behind spring is simply to not follow a time when we have really stressed the aquifer to the max and we've given the aquifer a chance to recover so that we can begin to see if something is actual elastic or inelastic. That's
helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. And then with respect to, let's see, could you remind me of what your second question was?
Yeah, just if any drawdown is going close at this point.
Yes, and in fact, in the city of Turlock, we have recently seen that some of the water levels in the wells associated with the cone of depression from the pumping for the city of Turlock is very close to the top of the Corcoran clay and may even be a foot or two below. And it's so difficult to really know what's going on in the aquifer when you're using, you know, water levels from production wells.
Right.
Nonetheless, we're a little close for comfort there. And one of the projects I know will begin to be addressing this and looking at water levels in this area. But that's the only area that I've seen of concern. It does also look like there's in the southeastern corner, maybe I could just pop back to a couple of maps here. We also see that the Corcoran clay, of course, is relatively shallow in this area. These negative levels are subsurface. So the Corcoran is very deep, and it's especially deep in this area. But it becomes very shallow in this area. And some of the water levels that we've seen in the southeastern area are also quite close to the Corcoran clay. So this area and this area are the two of concern, predominantly because this is where the Corcoran is so shallow.
Okay. Thank you. That'll come up when we start talking about the actual buffer itself.
Absolutely.
Okay.
In some cases, we might not have much of a buffer.
And Phyllis, one other thing on the Corcoran clay, not that I'm an expert, but there's always been this debate, like the eastern extent of the Corcoran clay, like USGS had one line and then there was another line. And I know just a little bit of local experience that as it gets shallower and shallower, the Corcoran clay, it kind of lenses out. It's not as a solid, thick, impermeable layer. And so it gets kind of spotty. So I don't know what impact that could have on subsidence too, when it's that kind of spotty in the Turlock, in east of Turlock area, whether subsidence is an issue when the Corcoran clay is just more in lenses than a thick, solid layer.
Thank you for pointing that out. I think that when we show these kinds of maps, everybody thinks that it's one clay and that it is magically right there. It is magically not there. And that's a simplification, of course, of the rather complex hydrogeological system. And we'll want to look at this on a case-by-case basis. Nonetheless, what we're looking at for subsidence is an overall decline of a surface. So I think that, again, just like all of our other combinations of how we're going to be looking and identifying undesirable results in the field with our monitoring program, it's not just one well, one place, one time. As you point out, we will need to pay close attention. In some areas, especially in these areas where it's shallowing, you sometimes get some sand lenses in that. And so we're really focusing on clay. That's really the key component that would be associated with land subsidence. And so if we have areas, and I know that we have some areas in here where we have sort of sand, clay, rather than just a clay lens. So you're absolutely right, especially as we get close to this red line, there are a lot of transitions and we'll want to be when we set our minimum thresholds. Any other questions about land subsidence?
Hi, Phyllis. This is Amanda, DWR.
Hi, Amanda.
Hi. So I did have a question. Is there any consideration given to the statewide land subsidence data set that DWR is providing, incorporating that somehow into kind of tracking land subsidence in the subbasin? Just wondering if you guys are considering that.
Yes, ma'am, we are, and that's exactly what this INSAR screening data refers to. I didn't review it again in this presentation, but in previous presentations, we've actually looked at that data and examined it with respect to our subbasin. And we have identified that as a potential screening tool and appreciate the fact that DWR is providing that to everyone in the Central Valley.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, we do have plans to continue to do that. So I just was checking in. Thanks.
That's great. Thank you so much.
Phyllis,
All right, so let's, I'm sorry?
Sorry, Phyllis, this is Valerie. I have two quick questions. Obviously, this undesirable results definition has some areas in which we'll need to kind of further develop. But right now it says undesirable results will be evidenced by an exceedance of MTs. Do we really mean one exceedance, or is that like a placeholder where we talk about how many exceedances we will allow before an undesirable result is triggered? That's my first question. And then my second question is, I apologize, I don't know if I missed this, but are we doing, is the prior slide saying that we're going to have 4 representative monitoring wells for subsidence, or did I totally misread that?
No, I mean, those are the best candidates that we have for the GSP in-field monitoring right now. So yes, we will at a minimum have that, and we will need to supplement that with screening data and again, perhaps benchmark measurements going forward, and then improve that monitoring program as we go forward over time.
So from a layperson's perspective, which is always mine, we're going to have a monitoring network for groundwater quality, a monitoring network for groundwater elevations, and then would you call this our subsidence monitoring network of 4 points, and only, I guess, west of that red line? Is that right, or am I thinking of that incorrectly?
No, you're thinking of that correctly. Again, 4 is not a lot, but it's a beginning, and it's something that we can build on over time. But you're absolutely right. And FYI, this doesn't mean that the 2 existing wells and the 2 proposed wells, and please forgive me for just putting 2 green dots on a map. I know my team members are on this call that are looking at this going, we're looking now at where we're going to recommend siting wells, and Phil's just plopped a couple of dots on a map. So that's very much to be determined. But when we get those wells properly located and installed, and with the 2 additional monitoring wells that are shown here, pending approval of the owners of those monitoring wells for incorporating those into the GSP network, we can use those wells for other sustainability indicator monitoring as well.
Okay. And sorry, this is Valerie again. That's helpful. I apologize but can you indulge me in explaining why a monitoring well for subsidence? Is it getting different information? I can picture what the monitoring network for groundwater quality and why we put it in places. And I know that we would get levels of constituents. Similarly, we would have the monitoring network for elevations. And I think I understand that we would have groundwater elevation readings. Can we not use existing wells to kind of look at subsidence? Because I'm assuming that they're going to be measuring something that I can't quite imagine or describe. Is there any way you can help me with that?
These are actually proposed to be water level measurements as a
Okay.
proxy for land subsidence. Water level measurements.
Okay, so they're actually going to be measuring water level. It's not like they're going to be measuring any sort of subsidence or Corcoran clay elasticity or anything like that. Is that
Nope,
right?
that's correct for these 4 wells. And then the benchmarks that we have are actually, high resolution surveying GPS with respect to whether or not the land is actually subsiding at the benchmark areas. And so there will be probably some combination of because there is a benchmark. I didn't put it on this map. It's approximately at this location. So it's at a good location with respect to continuing to monitor it. It's been monitored by others up until now. I think we've gone over this a couple of times, but there are a variety of agencies in California that are looking at land surface monitoring. Sometimes it's for land subsidence. Often it's for tectonic reasons. And as a result of that, there are some additional existing benchmarks with historical data. And so you always want to find something that has historical data if you can. I don't think the GSAs are opposed to putting in new benchmarks or new monitoring points. But if you already have historical information at a location, it makes it much more valuable. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, that's very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. And then I didn't get to your question yet because of the and that's a very good catch. You're such a terrific, you're attorney at heart. You were looking at the words, and I appreciate that so much. That was not meant to indicate singular at all. It should be taken out, and it's more evidenced by exceedances.
Okay.
So that
I think that
will be
Thank you.
corrected. Yeah, thank you for always finding my my things that I need to correct.
Hi,
Okay.
Phyllis. This is.
Oh, hi, Debbie. Yes, please.
Could you go back one more slide?
Yes, of course.
So my question relates to, so you're using water levels as a proxy, and then you're supplementing with INSAR data. Did you consider the other way around? Like using the INSAR data and then supplementing it with other information, like other benchmarks and the water levels? I'm just asking. And what's the pros and cons to that?
I'm not 100% sure there's a practical difference here. The INSAR data are available on monthly time steps, and our data will be on monthly time steps. I think what I was trying to do with the INSAR data by calling it screening is that it has full coverage. And whereas these 4 points are only 4 discrete locations. And so if you wanted to think of these as being supplemental to this, I guess I was thinking of a screening tool as something that might identify an area that's not being directly monitored. And so I was thinking in terms of using this to say, oh, this is indicative that something is going on in this area, for example. That would be a target for an improved direct monitoring well. Does that make sense?
Sure. I just, I guess the only reason I asked that is that, you know, the INSAR data would cover, you know, the entire area, and then you could have, you know, you have the monitoring points. And so that's why I was wondering why we didn't flip it and use the INSAR data as the screening data, and then look at the other, although you would have to change the undesirable results and the minimum thresholds and all of that likely. So maybe that's kind of, and I don't know if it makes a difference.
We certainly could do that, and that would that would simply mean that we would move in the direction of a rate of subsidence as indicated by the INSAR data as being the minimum threshold rather than a water level proxy in the monitoring wells. I'm open to doing it either way, and certainly want as much input from the GSAs and guidance there. We can go either direction. I will say that I guess part of my concern with respect to having the MTs associated with the INSAR screening data is that this is the first time that we've actually looked at these data in this subbasin. And, you know, unlike other areas where, you know, areas that have had historical subsidence, there's better documentation of how best, for example, down in Corcoran, where they have some issues with respect to the Kauai area. They've been doing this for some time. They have NASA involved, and they've got the JPL data that goes back now several years. And so this is sort of the first, as it were, of these data and this subbasin. And so I thought it might be a bit premature to set an MT based on those data. I'm not opposed to doing it, and we can talk about what that might look like. But if the GSAs would like to do that, we certainly can go that direction.
And I wasn't pushing for that. I was just asking the question to understand better kind of your thought process for
sure
for kind of where we are and why. And all of that makes sense. And frankly, I think you and I have talked about how in other places you've noticed where the INSAR data might show different land use practices, and it may, you know, be misconstrued as being subsidence when in reality they've re-leveled the field or something. And so that, you know, in my mind, kind of leads to maybe the other option that you're suggesting. But I think maybe over time, as we learn more and more about the INSAR data and what it means for us, maybe we can make better use of it. I don't know. And this is an evolving process. You know, it's like Sigma will kind of grow and mature over time as we learn more and as we develop more monitoring locations and all kinds of stuff. So I guess I'm fine with this if others are. I just wanted to have the question answered. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you very much. That was excellent. I appreciate you making us think. Anything else on land subsidence today? Moving to the water quality sustainability indicator. I'm taking today as an opportunity to do something that I've been wanting to do actually from the beginning, but I felt like that I just didn't want the water quality to dominate the discussion. I've mentioned this several times, but I've never quite given you any kind of a quick summary of this. But this is a really excellent guide that's published by Stanford and Water in the West for the water quality requirements under Sigma. And this document, I think, has been, you know, it was written post regulations and post BMPs and was, you know, a very thoughtful deep dive into what might be a reasonable approach to the water quality sustainability indicator under Sigma, because I think this is a really difficult one to figure out. We've said several times that the GSAs clearly do not have a mandate, nor do they have an authority to move into the water quality responsibilities that have already been designated by others. So I'm taking today as an opportunity for 3 quick slides. It has information on it that we don't need to go through every detail, but I thought you might want it as reference with respect to this document, this Guide to Water Quality Requirements under the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act by Tara Moran and Aletta Balin. And so I've summarized the document in these quick bullets, and then I have reproduced the recommendations of this document on the next 2 slides. So let's go through this briefly. So the California legislature has already designated the principal state agencies that are responsible for water quality, and they are the State Water Resources Control Board generally and the regional boards. Certainly that responsibility is shared among additional state and local agencies. With respect to the Turlock Subbasin, there are responsibilities not only for the Department of Toxic Substances Control, and some of the cities have environmental departments with some authority there, and the counties certainly do as well. But SGMA is expressly states that the GSAs are not responsible for fixing undesirable results for any of the sustainability indicators, but specifically for water quality that were already present before January 1st, 2015. And in addition to that, they're not required, nor do they have the authority to take over regulatory roles for water qualities that are assigned to other regulatory agencies. So this document really provides some guidance as to, if you're not doing these things, then what are the responsibilities and what are the recommendations for how the GSA should move forward. And I think this 4th bullet here summarizes quite a bit of what this document is suggesting, is that there just be some communication, some coordination between the regulatory agencies, including the GSAs, on any water quality and desirable results. The specific recommendation is to assess potential impacts of the water quality from GSP projects or management actions. So this is specifically what the GSA is very explicitly and very singularly doing and required to do, is to look at these impacts. And if adverse impacts could occur from these actions, then of course it's up to the GSAs to consider options to avoid or mitigate water quality problems. This is also sounds very similar, I know, to all of us as the CEQA process as well. And as part of the grant, we are going to be going through the programmatic EIR and evaluating what our projects and management actions could potentially do with respect to water quality. So I know that the GSAs are already on top of this, but I just wanted to confirm with you all in a public presentation that these are the specific recommendations of this document as well. These recommendations from the documents, there are 7 of them, and I have just put a lot of these words on 2 slides. They are very straightforward, but I would recommend that anyone interested in thinking more about this sustainability indicator actually get this reference and go through it. It's very well written and very well organized. Essentially, their recommendations involve understanding the regulatory regime already in your subbasin for water quality, considering local standards, specifically drinking water standards for water quality issues, and working directly. This was a direct recommendation of theirs to work directly with the Central Valley regional boards on water quality issues involving salts and nutrients. They're way ahead of us on that issue. There are so many additional requirements that are evolving as we go, and we want to align ourselves with these other groundwater monitoring programs so that we're not duplicating what's already being done in front of us. We're using our existing groundwater quality data to already do these 3 things, but the recommendations specifically are to use it to describe current and historical groundwater conditions, prioritize groundwater quality issues, and provide the basis for your monitoring programs. I mean, I think this is very straightforward, but again, nicely summarized in this document. For water quality problems that either arose or were exacerbated after this January 1st deadline, again, the recommendations from the document are to confer with the responsible agency and make sure that there's some reasonable plan to address this problem in place. And if we can do this before this GSP is developed, then reference the plan in this GSP. And if not, as we update going forward, capture that information there. If there is no responsible agency for a water quality problem that's been identified in the basin, then the recommendations are to confer directly with state board staff and affected parties to see if there could be a reasonable plan put forth to address the problem. And again, documenting the problem, if there are any reasons that remedial activities are either impractical or infeasible, then document that as well. So really just coordinate with responsible agencies, and document that as you go. And I think that really is the guiding principles that the document emphasizes. And then 6 and 7, additional recommendations from the document. These are in the executive summary as well as in the back of this document. I've paraphrased in some cases, so when you go to the document, you will see that there's actually some additional phrasing and more words in there than what I have here, but I've tried to capture the essence here. And again, number 6 is us. Consider the following when we're planning projects and actions that could affect water quality, to assess the potential impacts, revise the projects to mitigate the impacts as necessary, and then to ensure regulatory compliance so that if there are other responsible agencies for water quality, that they're involved and brought into the process. And I think, again, this subbasin is already moving forward on this with respect to the CEQA process that we're getting ready to embark on as we finish up the GSP. And then finally, the document, I didn't write this one down, but the document does continually say over and over again to make good use of what's already being done with respect to groundwater monitoring, especially for groundwater quality monitoring programs that have been in place for many years and providing a lot of excellent historical data. So again, using existing water quality in the subbasin, considering the level of groundwater development, considering the severity of existing groundwater quality issues and the proximity of those to domestic irrigation wells, public water supply wells, or vulnerable users. So I've taken this recommendation and I've got one more slide following this to kind of build on that. Current or proposed groundwater management actions and projects, we've mentioned that twice already. Local resources with respect to putting in wells, and the hydrogeological complexity of the subbasin. I think all subbasins have their own level of that, no question. So let's talk just briefly about the thought process with respect to the monitoring and water quality data associated in the subbasin. So just briefly thinking about and focusing on drinking water wells and public water supply wells. So this map just shows a couple of key features related to that. There are maybe more than 150 or so municipal and urban community water supply wells in the subbasin. Most of those are shown there by the blue dots. And again, you see Delhi, Hillmore, the city of Turlock, Keys, Houston, Ceres, etc., Hickman. So we have the data that the Division of Drinking Water requires from those wells, as well as some data from the 100 or so public water systems, which are shown by polygons in pink across the subbasin. What we see here are some of these are water supply wells for mobile home parks. Some of them are state recreation areas. Some of them are truck stops. Some of them are cafes or bakeries. So a variety of things that are considered public water systems, but again, a data source for us to better understand water quality data in the subbasin going forward. For minimum threshold considerations, certainly we want to think in terms of drinking water standards, but also recognize that there is a basin plan and that the regional boards also have water quality objectives associated with that. So we want to be able to document that in the GSP as well. And then you've already seen the information that we provided from the basin setting with respect to the water quality monitoring data. This is historical data. All of these wells are not currently being monitored now, but it does give you an idea of the programs from which additional future data may be available. For example, I mentioned this, that the Division of Drinking Water requires drinking water systems to sample water quality in connection with their permit and compliance with their permits. The CV Salts program ongoing and providing a lot of information. The GAMMA program, which is a State Water Resources Control Board and USGS cooperative, that is ongoing and provides a lot of good detailed basic information. And then for environmental cleanup and investigations associated with dischargers and in industries, it's data are usually available on the GeoTracker or the EnviroStore websites online. So these are sort of the main data sources that we used to put together the water quality information for the basin setting. This also has that there are some private non-agencies and other special studies data that we pulled into our basin setting. But going forward, hopefully I will go forward, we can incorporate some of this information into the GSP. And one way to do that is to compile and review these data annually, again, following the recommendations from the Stanford document to confer with the responsible agencies as needed. And again, supplementing existing monitoring with GSA monitoring, and in particular for projects and management actions as needed going forward. So that is the additional information that I'm pulling together for the water quality sustainability indicator. And I have attempted to incorporate Valerie's great idea from the last meeting, where we can look at a possible two-tier criteria for undesirable results, recognizing that there may be water quality problems that either were existing in the subbasin before the GSAs were formed, or those that have have responsibility from agencies for others. And so the way that this would work, again, this undesirable result is rather generic and has not yet been changed. But then this would provide us with a little bit more detailed guidance with respect to how to go about seeing whether or not the undesirable result and the minimum thresholds are applicable to the GSAs. And essentially this framework document just suggests that when the minimum threshold, which again considers the drinking water standard or other water quality objectives such as basin plan, when that's exceeded in greater than some percentage of the designated monitoring locations, and these could be either monitored by GSAs or others, then the GSAs will consider whether the GSA actions could have caused or exacerbated the change in water quality. And the examples that I've provided don't have to remain in the framework, but I just thought it was helpful for you to see what I was thinking about. That might be pumping near contaminant plumes, because the GSA regulations specifically ask the GSAs to pay attention to whether or not they are exacerbating or spreading contamination plumes through pumping. And then obviously the potential for water quality impacts on recharge projects. And the percentage of those monitoring locations based on conditions that arise or worsen after January 1st, 2015. And then, so that does not mean, you'll notice that I did not say that when this happens, this is an undesirable result, but rather when this happens, the GSAs now need another level of analysis. Was that problem GSA related? Could it have been GSA related? Is there something that the GSAs are doing specifically under the GSP that could have exacerbated or caused these issues? And if not, then that gives you the opportunity to simply confer with local responsible agencies to ensure the problem is being addressed, and you can document that to make sure that you're stewards of the basin. And then if a problem is GSA related, then that would be an undesirable result and will need to be addressed directly by the GSA. So this provides the decision making to occur as to whether or not there is a need to confer with responsible agencies about a problem that might affect the sustainability of the subbasin and make sure that it's being addressed, or whether the GSAs need to address it directly. Valerie, this was your great idea that I was trying to off on. Does this make sense to you? Is this the type of thing that you had in mind? Sorry to put you on the spot.
That's okay. I don't know if it was a great idea, but I like it. I like it in the sense that it talks about GSA related issues. I do think trying to read that middle part. I do think the ideas of the previous recommendations, which I've read before, about knowing and understanding the existing regulatory context out there, probably should be somehow tied in here. And I'm trying to see if whether the MT is exceeded and greater. So I guess the MT would kind of track that. Part of this might be, you know, you always confer with the regulatory agencies, but on groundwater quality issues that are thought to be related to GSA activities, then we do this. So I guess you capture that by saying if it's not a GSA related issue, then it is an undesirable result and will be addressed by the GSA. If the problem is a GSA related. So if the problem isn't, I think we should, you are saying that, sorry, confer with the local responsible agency to ensure that they're addressing it. I don't know if addressing it is right, but you know, I think that's the right concept, which is if we're not moving plumes or causing an issue about moving or increasing groundwater quality issues, then our job really is to just confer with the existing regulatory agencies.
Yeah, and I'm putting that on the GSAs just as the sort of keepers of sustainability to just follow the groundwater conditions within the subbasin.
Yeah, and I know that this isn't final, and you know how I like to nitpick words, but I mean, we should work on the language of, you know, if the problem, I guess if it would be, if the exceedance, I don't know what we should say about that, but that strikes me as something I want to edit.
Good. I appreciate that very much, and I welcome that. I will say this, I used water quality problem rather than water quality issue, specifically mirroring the language that's in the Stanford guidance. So just that doesn't mean that I like it better or that that's more meaningful. It just means that I was trying to incorporate something that I thought was a good reference.
Yeah, you know me, I would be tempted to edit that too.
I welcome that, Valerie. I love it. I'm so glad that you're working on this. What other comments do people have?
Any comments for Phyllis?
Yes, right. This is Amanda Monaco with Leadership Council. I also saw that in the participants, Amanda Peisch-Derby's hand was raised, so she might have a comment as well. But I think this is a good approach. I like the 2 tiers. I think that's very reasonable, given that, you know, if it's not a problem caused or related to GSA activities, the GSA says, okay, we'll talk to someone else about that. If it is something the GSA may have caused, then there's a further looking into that and addressing it by the GSA. That tracks with kind of our understanding of the requirements under SGMA. I do have, I guess, one suggestion and one question. In ensuring that it's related to existing standards such as MCLs, I think that could be handled by making sure that the minimum threshold is linked to the MCLs. And I know the East Kauai and some other GSAs in the Kauai Subbasin have done that in a way that seems pretty logical and relating it to the MCL. So I'd suggest looking into that. And then my question is, who determines whether the problem's GSA related or not?
Well, these are public agencies, so I would assume that the GSA in a public process does and shows that evaluation. Specifically who, I don't know, but there are member agencies as well as the GSAs, and I would be coordinating with one another. Does someone with the GSAs want to speak to how you would determine, how you might determine that?
Phyllis, this is Valerie. My thoughts on that are that we'll probably have to develop more specific language, and it's a good thought. But the concept is if it's not a project, like if it's not a recharge project that's moving a plume, or if it is an existing pre-2015 issue, I think we can put in some thresholds, that we can put in some language that talk about when you determine that. But there are certainly, if it's not related to a GSA project or a GSA action, then, you know, I think it's by default not the GSA. It wouldn't be created by the GSA.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, I know that I'm not a hydrogeologist, but in my involvement in Sigma so far, well, so a GSA action, our understanding, our read of the law is that the GSA could be responsible for addressing the problem if it's a GSA action, which could include a project or a policy, including the setting of minimum thresholds, because in some cases, if you allow for continued pumping, that could potentially increase arsenic levels. So there could be some groundwater contamination impacts from just where you set the minimum thresholds, which is a larger and kind of more complicated, I would think would be a more complicated process of evaluating that versus just whether it's caused by a project. So I'd be interested in seeing how y'all would evaluate that and who would do that.
The only thing that I'll say to that, Amanda, is that I believe you're correct, that there is language in the regulations as well as in the water quality guidance that says that it's not just a project, but it is any management action. And so the management actions would absolutely require or absolutely include the process of setting the minimum thresholds.
Thanks.
Thank you. Anybody else have any comments before we go through the last little pieces? I'm almost done. Okay. So this is the first time that we've actually talked about management actions. And the reason that I am talking about management actions rather than projects is an important point. And I want everybody to recognize that the projects are the real larger, those are in development. I know from talking to those that are already working on them that there are many of the projects that are already being thought through and being worked on and being sort of screened at a low level before brought forth to the GSAs. And most of those are recharge projects, and those have a very high potential of helping the GSP process move forward. So I don't want anybody to think that the fact that I'm focused today on management actions has anything to do with my thinking that this is the first thing to think about. The projects are really the first thing to think about. And as everyone knows, we've been having some difficulties getting the modeling completed for the projected water budgets. And so in some ways, these are placeholder concepts until we can get those data in front of you. But I thought that we would at least begin to think about it, because some of these are policy decisions and they may take some thought. And as a hydrogeologist, I may not be the right person to think about policy decisions. So I'm going to ask for help on this. So just a couple of quick things. I brought in what I believe, this is just my own personal opinion, 3 kind of key concepts from the regulations with respect to these management actions. And I'll just say this, so Subarticle 5 deals with the projects and management actions, and many of the requirements in the regulations are for both. And so pulling one out in divorce of the other is really not what I'm trying to do here. But these are the key things that I wanted to at least mention today. So each plan has to include a description of the projects and the management actions that the agency has determined will achieve the sustainability goal. So you have a draft sustainability goal that we're working toward. And then I think it's helpful to recognize that it's also put together to respond to changing conditions in the basin. So this future projected water budget will be dealing with the potential changes that we might see in the basin going forward. And again, analyzing the analysis, analyzing the subbasin for how these projects and management actions could move us toward sustainability. The regulations require that you describe how the management actions are put in place in order to achieve your measurable objectives. And then if overdraft conditions are identified, this is actually this little piece right in here of SARB Article 5. If overdraft conditions are identified, the plan shall describe projects or management actions, including a quantification of demand reduction or other methods as needed for the mitigation of overdraft. So as a result of this last bullet, I think that one of the things you'll see as we begin to look at our adjacent subbasins examples of management actions, you'll see that this is sort of the one thing that they've keyed in and focused in on. And so again, just for your reference, I know that you have in the past asked me to take advantage of what the critically overdrafted basins have done. We recognize that this is not what you're doing, but it gives you an opportunity for the first time. You know, you might be thinking of management actions for the very first time in the context of the GSP. And if you can see what others have done, sometimes that will trigger thoughts, or it may actually tell you what you don't want to do as well. But to get that process going, I have reproduced from the Merced. And so you will see over here, you will see Merced in this column over here, some of the details from that, and also from the Delta Mendota GSP. So these are just some of the management actions that are in the two adjacent subbasins, the Merced to our south and the Delta Mendota to the west. And in some cases, there might be some repeats. And so I didn't exactly put down everything over here, but I just, again, just thinking in terms of beginning the discussion, these are organized sort of by a category, so to speak. So there are administrative actions and plans to protect groundwater, including drought contingencies that some people have in place, using pumping rules to minimize subsidence for the lower aquifer. I thought this was an interesting concept. This is in connection with the Merced County mitigation rule that they have in place, that if someone drills a well in Merced County in the lower aquifer, that they need to demonstrate that they will not exacerbate or cause land subsidence. And so this concept, this sort of management rule, is only in Merced County, so it does apply to some of our subbasin, but we might want to adopt that or consider adopting that in our GSP for the entire subbasin. Increasing GSA access to and input on well permits. So this just asks the counties to please confer with the GSAs, and I think Stanislaus County and their discretionary well permit already assumes that the GSA process is going to be involved. Groundwater extraction fees, this might be something that's similar to what's going on with respect to the Prop 218. I think that's more just the planning document, but from the Delta Mendota side, they actually included this as a management action to collect groundwater fees or production charges from wells and use those revenues to fund the projects for the GSP. Merced is anticipating the initiation of a groundwater allocation framework. So they provide some language in there to allow the sustainable yield to be allocated to each one of the GSAs and to establish groundwater extraction limits. There's also additional management actions for reducing groundwater pumping, maximizing use of other water supplies. This is really the concept, again, of conjunctive use, which is part of your sustainability goal. Developing a program to incentivize the use of surface water, again, conjunctive use, and reducing groundwater demand. This actually allowed for some additional details that were interesting. And in some cases, I don't have every word reproduced on this PowerPoint slide. And I would encourage you that if you see something that seems interesting to you, to actually look at the guiding GSP to get more information on each one of these. Some of these they're a little cryptic now because I've again rephrased some of this, and as a result you might not even understand it with respect to how it's shown here, and you might want to go and read more information. There's reduced groundwater use associated with portfolios that the City of Patterson have put in their 2018 Water Master Plan that they're planning to implement. There's the concept of rotational fallowing of croplands that could be implemented in certain agricultural areas of the Delta-Mendota subbasin. And then, of course, filling in data gaps is always something that is required and that we will want to do. We're identifying them as we go through our GSP process. Any questions about any of these management plans associated with Merced or Delta-Mendota's GSPs? Seeing none, I'm just going to pop to one more. This is my additional ideas for management actions for consideration. Again, just to kind of force the issue and get the ball rolling with respect to all of us thinking about what we might want to see in the GSP for management actions. You know, it's interesting that people talk a lot about getting the MTs together and the MOs together and getting this identified as an undesirable result. But very few of the plans that I've read actually say what's going to happen, you know, should this occur. And it's incumbent on the GSAs to at least consider an action plan. I put a little 5-step action plan in the current GSP that I can share with you. It's quite generic, but it at least provides a framework of who's supposed to do what when, and it gives us a way to kind of move forward if MTs are exceeded. I also have included for your consideration a management action that says that you are going to develop a groundwater extraction reporting program. So groundwater extraction, annual groundwater extraction reporting is going to be required. That's a requirement of your annual report. And so you might want to be thinking about how best to manage that within the GSAs, determine methods and procedures for this, and how best you're going to scale that up for the annual reporting event. That's actually coming up a lot quicker than we'd all like to think. Your first annual report is going to be due April 1st after we turn this GSP in January 30th, 2022. So yeah, the fun is continuing after that big push for January. We're going to do another big push for April. So again, confer and coordinate with local responsible agencies on existing water quality monitoring programs as applicable. This is directly what we've just been talking about with respect to the water quality indicator, and I just wrote that down as a possible consideration to incorporate that in as a policy decision for your management actions. And then I think that everybody will need and want to see improvement to the GSP monitoring networks as we go forward over time. So that's the first quick pass at potential management actions for your GSP. Does anybody have any comments or suggestions or ideas or anything?
This is Amanda Monaco with Leadership Council again. Thanks for reviewing all this, Phyllis. One thing that we have seen in other GSAs and worked with GSAs to try to put in their GSPs is a drinking water protection program, given that in some instances it's pretty clear that some or many domestic wells might go dry. And in order to protect the human right to drinking water and protect drinking water as the primary beneficial use of water, we've worked with the East Cahuilla GSA, Greater Cahuilla GSA, and the Madera GSA to put that kind of program in their GSP, and they've just put it as a kind of a placeholder and are developing it, but I strongly encourage the GSAs to also include that in their GSPs. And we have a drinking water mitigation program kind of framework that our organization has developed alongside the Community Water Center and self-help enterprises to help think through what that kind of program could look like.
Thanks, Amanda. Phyllis, do you have a copy of the document that Amanda's talking about?
I
Framework?
actually do, yeah.
Oh, great.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. All right. Let's take a look at that.
Yeah, it occurs to me that I just remembered that you said that Amanda with DWR had her hand up. Did we go completely by you, Amanda, and not get your question answered?
Oh, no, thank you. I had it up before I brought up the INSAR. So you totally answered my question. I failed to lower my hand. And thank you, Amanda Monaco, for catching it and mentioning it. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no worries. Of course.
And Phyllis, this is Valerie. One of the things that I think you did a good job here is the distinction between programs and management actions. And certainly that drinking water or any, whether it's mitigation or any other program to address drinking water, in my mind, I think that is more of a program than a management action. I always think of them as like, you don't have that many dials to turn, and one is adding water and adding programs, and one is addressing operations and focusing on conjunctive use and extraction limitation. So there are lots of programs that I think we will consider, but my understanding was that this was just management actions, which is kind of the operational turning the dial back action rather than dialing it forward.
Thank you for that, Valerie. Thank you for helping me clarify some things there. Okay, that's really it for me, except for my next steps, which I always like to put up. Oop, skip right by it. This is starting to like the same slide that I'm recycling here. We're trying very hard to get projected water budgets in front of you, and it isn't as if it's not happening. It's just much slower than I personally would have thought. But it is continuing, and I'm going to say that we're still on target to get this in front of you in October. It's not July as we originally, some of you might be sitting there going, I thought this was July, August instead of September, October, but we're certainly pushing, and so we're doing what we can on that. Continued consideration of these preliminary sustainable management criteria. I think we've done a lot of good work. I'm certainly getting feedback on the memoranda that we've done and getting that incorporated and getting that into your GSP. And so we will be obviously getting those sections of the GSP ready and circulating to the TAC as we go. And then certainly today was the first pass again at management actions and not at projects, but we want to get that going. I think once we get the projected water budgets, we'll have the model ready to do the analysis for the projects. That doesn't mean we can't start talking about the projects. So we want to continue to push on all of these fronts. I'm happy to take any questions or any comments or discussion that anybody else wants to raise at this time.
Well, this is Michael. First, I want to thank you for your presentation today. It's nice to see it's starting to come together. I know in terms of the budget, Wes Monnier does our surface water modeling. He's been working hard to coordinate with MID and your modeling staff, just so we get a good comprehensive model that works. So sometimes it takes a little bit longer than we hope, but it's nice to get it right. I think the first time, something we're going to live with for the next 20 plus years. And again, it's getting close. I know there's a breakthrough yesterday, so hopefully we'll be there, like you say, in October. But I think it made a lot of sense to coordinate with the Modesto Subbasin on the modeling, which I don't know if every other basin does, but to do those kind of models together, I think is pretty innovative, and it's going to help us be successful over time.
I agree, and having that coordination with adjacent subbasins is huge from a technical standpoint. You don't have to have one side of the river saying one thing and one side of the river saying another, and then try to reconcile what's going on. So very, very proud that the GSAs in those subbasins stepped up to do the right thing there.
All right, any final questions for Phyllis?
Hi, this is Debbie. Phyllis, what is the process that you kind of envision for kind of getting input on potential projects and management actions? Are you looking for the agencies to provide you kind of lists of things that they've been thinking about, or had you thought through that process?
Well, as you may know, we have the modeling team guys that are doing the modeling right now. They are in charge of the first portions of that task. I'm just trying to push forward on some lists in the meantime. The process that we have envisioned in the work plan right now is a combination of lists from the GSAs and lists recommended from the project team as a screening, first as a screening process. So sort of get as many things on the page as we possibly can, allow the GSAs to consider them and to say, no, we're not going to do that, or we can't do that. Oh, well, we could do something similar to this and sort of move that forward. So the first process is screening. The second process is a little bit more detailed feasibility type analysis. Then we want to be able to select the most promising projects, get water quantities and volumes and timing, et cetera, associated with those. And that will give us the opportunity to do the modeling to see how close this brings us with respect to our avoidance of undesirable results and definition of sustainability for the future. So again, first is screening, second is a feasibility study, and third is the modeling of the project. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
All right, thank you, Phyllis.
Thank you.
Let's move on to item number 11, Sigma and other water-related updates. This is where TAC and the TGBA discuss and provide updates on issues under our purview. There's no action taken. So Herb, do you have a public outreach update for us?
Yeah, I just have a couple quick slides. Thank you, Michael. This is a quick public outreach update. The big thing I'm going to recap is we held our September 16th virtual community workshops. Was a second suite of workshops held this summer. And now that we're in fall, it ends the two suites of summer workshops that we held, and we're looking to hold some in fall as well. We had an 11 o'clock and a 5:30 session. About 40 participants in total, and maybe a little bit more if my math is off, but which is a little bit more than the last set of workshops we had in July. It was used on Zoom just like this call, and we stream them live, and we also archive them on YouTube. The topics we covered are a lot of similar topics that you've heard a little bit about today. We had DWR, Amanda from DWR, she presented on the regulations, the law for Sigma, groundwater sustainability in general, and covered a lot of that. And you see a copy of one of her slides on this slide here. I'm not in present mode, which I just noticed, but I don't think it changes too much. Give me a second. There we go. And so we also, the big thing that was kind of the take home that we were asking people, you always want to have an ask at a workshop. We had two things. The first of which was we encourage comments on the undesirable results framework, definitions framework that Phyllis referenced. We encourage people to submit comments to us on that. And then the second thing that we mentioned was for people to take our stakeholder survey, which I'll talk about in a second. Kevin provided a quick 5-minute Prop 218 update covering the East Turlock Subbasin's activities for funding there for Sigma. And then we also had an open Q&A session afterwards. And then Michael himself, he presented on where we're at in the Subbasin for sustainable management criteria. A lot of similar topics that have been discussed the past couple of meetings. We have the videos up and available online for both the 11 o'clock and the 5:30. And we're thinking, we haven't honed in on anything yet, but we're thinking next up, one of the things perfectly timed, we could possibly find a way to have a good discussion with stakeholders, perhaps potentially non-technical, but a good discussion nonetheless about projects and management actions. Here's a stakeholder assessment survey I mentioned. There's 2 links there at the bottom. We have it in English and in Spanish at each of the appropriate links there. We have 27 responses thus far. And from my initial look of some of the responses, you know, a lot of things are true to form or to par related to concerns with Sigma and thoughts. We revealed a couple of those at the virtual community workshops. And we're going to keep it open indefinitely, and people can continue to take it throughout the GSP process, so it can inform our work and how we kind of feed in to the efforts of the consulting team and the technical committee. And it covers stakeholder concerns and information, and it dabbles a little bit with, I think there's 1 or 2 questions about potential projects as well, which is part of the conversation we're having today. And that's my brief update. You see the ways to connect with Turlock Groundwater and the Turlock Subbasin right there. And that's all I have, I believe. Happy to answer any questions or anything comment-wise.
Any questions from Herb? Okay, hearing none. Grant update. Debbie or Michael?
Hi, this is Debbie. We are in the process of getting signatures for the contract amendment with Todd Groundwater to then subcontract with ESA for the draft PEIR works that is funded under the round 3 Sigma grant. And so that's the next step, is to get the subcontracting underway for that. As I understand it, the East Turlock Subbasin GSA is working on identifying the locations for the wells within their area that will be funded through the grant as well. And we are starting to look at where we might be able to site wells as well. But I think East Turlock is a little ahead of the west side on that. The wells aren't scheduled to be installed until later next year, but we do have an opportunity to do it earlier if we're able to get all of the other things in line to be able to do that and begin gathering data. So so we're looking to move it forward as quickly as we can, but recognizing that there's a lot of work to be done. I believe that Todd Groundwater is in the process of subcontracting with Wood Rogers, who will be doing the technical work for that portion of the grant. So, so then they will begin to help with design work and that sort of thing once we have identified locations. And Kevin, I do need to talk with you a little bit about access agreements and that sort of thing. So maybe we can have a call after this to walk through kind of how to move forward with that process, so you guys can continue on that effort. I spoke with Liz earlier today, and she mentioned, or yesterday, and she mentioned that we might need to do that.
Yeah, I'll call you right after this meeting if that's appropriate.
That would be great. Thank you.
Sure.
I think that's all I had at this point. Does anyone have any questions, or did I miss something? Oh, and the grant work, but we've already talked about that.
Okay. So next meeting, our next special meeting of the Joint Technical Advisory Committees is the East and West Turlock GSAs. That's October 8th, 2020. And then the TGBA, the Turlock Groundwater Basin Association, put this on your calendar, March 25th, 2021. Guaranteed no coronavirus that date. I can't say that for sure, but that's what we're all hoping and praying for, right? So March 25th, 2021 is the next meeting of the TGBA where we'll go over CASGEM again. Okay, with that, we have a quorum from TGBA. So can I get a motion for adjournment for the Turlock Groundwater Basin Association?
I'll motion. Maldonado.
Thank you, Andrew. And a second from
Kevin?
Kevin. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Okay, TGBA is adjourned. Kevin, East Turlock, you want to adjourn?
Yeah, we'd like to adjourn. Dennis, Walt?
Yes, I'll move.
Dennis,
adjourn.
all right, thank you. We're adjourned at 3:42.
Wonderful. Okay, thank you so much, everybody, and stay safe. Take care.
Thank you.
You too. Likewise.
Thank you.